He was once the world's undisputed paragon, a king draped not merely in regal finery, but imbued with a divine intellect that shimmered brighter than any gold. King Solomon, son of David, was divinely chosen, blessed with a discernment so profound it left even the discerning Queen of Sheba breathless. He didn't just inherit a throne, he inherited divine favor, unparalleled glory, and a legacy most mortals only glimpse in their wildest dreams. But imagine this. What if Solomon's twilight years bore no resemblance to his radiant dawn? What if, beneath the veneer of opulence and power, a creeping darkness quietly took root? What shadows truly lurked behind the gilded palace walls as Solomon aged? How could a man who once walked in intimate communion with God find himself bowing before mute, lifeless idols? And how could the architect of God's magnificent temple become the architect of his own spiritual ruin? If this resonates within you, whisper a prayer. Lord, hold me fast, lest I fall. And to our cherished supporters, whose every like and share fuels our mission, your presence is a beacon. We are profoundly grateful. May your generosity be met with blessings overflowing. Now, lend your ear. Solomon's tale transcends mere history. It serves as a stark spiritual mirror, reflecting the insidious dangers of unbridled pride, corrosive compromise, and the seductive allure of success, devoid of spiritual surrender. How does a man transition from authoring the timeless wisdom of Proverbs to lamenting in Ecclesiastes that everything is ultimately meaningless? Was he lost, broken beyond repair, or desperately trying to warn generations to come? Ponder this. If the wisest mortal who ever lived could stray from the path, what makes us believe we are invulnerable? Could it be that God meticulously preserved the details of Solomon's tragic decline, not to shame him, but to safeguard us? This isn't just the biography of a king. It's the story of every soul who has ascended to great heights only to find a gnawing emptiness, who has heard the voice of God yet chosen to follow a different path, who has painstakingly built something beautiful only to discover it cannot fill the void within. Have you ever wondered what happens when blessings morph into burdens, or when profound wisdom is divorced from unwavering obedience? In the moments ahead, we'll unveil a sacred window into Solomon's final days, his introspections, his regrets, his ultimate downfall. But more importantly, we'll decipher the urgent message he left for you. Yes, you, the one listening now, grappling with similar temptations, wrestling with burgeoning pride, or drifting further from your initial, ardent love for God. Stay with us until the very end, because the wisdom contained within this story may be the lifeline your soul desperately needs. Remember to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell so you never miss another transformative biblical insight. We eagerly await your thoughts. What aspect of Solomon's journey speaks most powerfully to your own life at this moment? Share your reflections in the comments and become part of the conversation. Now let us enter the final, haunting chapter of King Solomon's life. The ascent, the descent, and the silent anguish of a man who seemingly possessed everything, yet tragically lost the one thing that truly mattered. Are you prepared to discover what that was? Let us begin. The last days of King Solomon's life. The tragic denouement of the wisest king. Solomon's reign commenced not as a conventional royal inheritance, but as a divine orchestration, a heavenly appointment. He was more than just the offspring of David and Bathsheba. He was the chosen vessel of a sacred promise, the conduit through which the wisdom of God would be poured out upon an entire nation. While many anticipated a king characterized by military prowess or shrewd political maneuvering, Solomon's rise to power was steeped in something far more profound: the anointing of divine favor. From the very inception of his rule, God's presence was undeniably palpable. One still night in Gibeon, under the vast expanse of the heavens, the Lord manifested himself to Solomon in a dream. This was not merely a fleeting dream. It was a direct invitation from the Almighty, a celestial summons. As chronicled in 1 Kings 3-5, God inquired of him, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Pause and contemplate that for a moment. If the Creator of the universe offered to grant your deepest desire, what would you request? Solomon could have chosen boundless riches, the annihilation of his enemies, or even the elusive gift of immortality. But in a moment destined to resonate through the annals of history, he humbly bowed his heart. "Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people," he implored in 1 Kings 3-9, "so that I may distinguish between good and evil. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" Can you sense the gravity of that request? It was not self-serving. It was a plea for wisdom to serve others, to administer justice with impartiality, and to uphold righteousness. And heaven responded with unrestrained delight. The Bible recounts in 1 Kings 3:10-14 that God was so profoundly pleased by Solomon's altruistic petition that he not only bestowed upon him the wisdom he sought, wisdom so vast it dwarfed that of all others, but also lavished upon him blessings he hadn't even dared to imagine, wealth surpassing comprehension, honor that would transcend geographical boundaries, and the promise of a life prolonged, contingent only upon his unwavering adherence to God's commandments. But what rendered this beginning so utterly extraordinary? Could it be that the genesis of a life often contains subtle foreshadowings of its intended culmination? Was Solomon being entrusted with something not merely royal, but profoundly sacred? These nascent days of Solomon's reign gleam with promise and untapped potential. And yet, as we are soon to discover, even the most luminous beginnings can be overshadowed by the choices that follow. How could a man endowed with such unparalleled divine insight ultimately tread a path that led him away from the very source of his wisdom? Continue watching, because as we delve deeper into Solomon's saga, we uncover profound truths not just about a king, but about the very essence of our own human condition. Shortly after God poured forth divine wisdom upon Solomon, that very gift was put to the ultimate test in a poignant case that would indelibly mark the dawn of his legendary discernment. Two women, both vehemently claiming to be the mother of the same infant, stood before the king, their voices fraught with desperation, their hearts consumed by grief and longing. This was not merely a legal wrangle. It was a watershed moment demanding supernatural insight, a judgment surpassing human capacity. What form of wisdom could possibly penetrate such a tangled web of raw emotion, blatant deception, and heart-wrenching pain? In 1 Kings 3:16-28, this extraordinary encounter is chronicled with reverence and awe. Solomon, with unwavering composure, calmly listened to their competing claims. Then, with deliberate precision, he issued a chilling command. "Bring a sword and divide the living child in two, giving half to one and half to the other." The room must have fallen into stunned silence, a tableau of disbelief. But Solomon's intention was never an act of violence. It was an act of revelation, a masterstroke of divine strategy. For in that very instant, the true mother, overcome with maternal instinct, cried out, fervently begging the king to relinquish the child to the other woman so that he might live. Her love was unequivocally sacrificial, utterly selfless, and instantly revealed her as the genuine mother. This was no ordinary judicial ruling. It was a divinely inspired strategy, a moment of transcendent wisdom. The people of Israel were left in stunned admiration, whispering amongst themselves in hushed tones. Only God could bestow upon a king such profound wisdom. From that day forward, Solomon's reputation as a man indwelt by the very Spirit of God began to spread far beyond the borders of Israel. Carried on the winds of awe and reverence, Scripture unequivocally affirms in 1 Kings 4:29-30 that God granted Solomon wisdom and exceptionally profound insight, along with a breadth of understanding as limitless as the grains of sand upon the seashore. Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the East, exceeding even the renowned wisdom of Egypt. Can you even begin to fathom the capabilities of a mind that held truths more profound than any sage or philosopher of his time? He was not merely a judge. He was a polymath, a poet, a philosopher, and a theologian, all rolled into one divinely gifted individual. Solomon penned 3,000 proverbs and composed over 1,000 songs, as recounted in 1 Kings 4:32. His writings unveiled profound truths concerning life's deepest mysteries, exploring the intricacies of creation, the complexities of leadership, the nuances of human nature, and the paramount importance of the fear of God. These were not hollow, superficial words. They were timeless echoes emanating from a mind attuned to the divine frequency. Have you ever encountered a proverb that resonated so deeply, it felt as though it were speaking directly to your soul? Many of those profound insights originated from the hand of Solomon. His fame spread so far and wide that it traversed kingdoms and continents, reaching the ears of rulers in distant lands. One of the most remarkable responses came from the Queen of Sheba, a monarch of immense wealth and undeniable influence. Intrigued by the widespread tales of Solomon's unparalleled wisdom, she undertook a perilous journey across vast deserts to put him to the ultimate test, to ascertain whether the rumors were indeed true. She arrived not merely driven by idle curiosity, but armed with a battery of questions so complex, so intricate, that only someone possessing divine insight could possibly provide the answers. What was it about Solomon that drew royalty from such distant lands? Was it solely his remarkable intellect, or was it the unmistakable, palpable presence of God that enveloped him? As we delve deeper into the ascent of this extraordinary king, we must confront a fundamental question. Can wisdom alone truly sustain a soul, or does it require something more, something deeper, something rooted in the divine? There is still much to uncover, many hidden layers to peel back, for while Solomon's wisdom undeniably dazzled the world, the crucial question remains: could he steadfastly walk in the light of the God who bestowed that wisdom upon him? Or would he ultimately succumb to the temptations that lay ahead? When the Queen of Sheba finally stood before Solomon, face to face with the man whose legend had reverberated across deserts and kingdoms, she was utterly overwhelmed, her senses reeling. Her words, meticulously recorded in 1 Kings 10:6-7, convey the sheer astonishment of someone who had anticipated greatness but encountered something far more profound: true glory. The reports I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom are true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report I heard. Can you fathom what it takes to utterly astonish a queen, a ruler accustomed to the finest things the world has to offer? What manner of presence, what degree of divine anointing could leave royalty utterly speechless, completely bereft of words? This moment was not merely a personal triumph for Solomon. It was a profound revelation of the extent to which God's favor rested upon him, and by extension, upon all of Israel. Foreign rulers were not merely marveling at the acuity of Solomon's mind. They were bearing witness to the tangible reality of a nation chosen and blessed by the Most High, a nation set apart for His divine purpose. The honor and unparalleled prosperity of Solomon's court pointed beyond the man himself, directing all eyes towards the sacred covenant God had forged with His chosen people. But amidst all his remarkable accomplishments, there was one endeavor that stood head and shoulders above the rest, a mission so profoundly sacred it had been fervently longed for by his father David, yet ultimately reserved for Solomon alone. That mission was the construction of the magnificent temple in Jerusalem. Described in meticulous detail in 1 Kings chapter 6, this was no ordinary structure, no mere edifice of stone and mortar. Solomon's temple was an architectural marvel, conceived not only with the pinnacle of human skill, but also under the direct guidance of divine inspiration. Imported cedar, sourced from the renowned forests of Lebanon, adorned its majestic halls. Its walls and furnishings were meticulously overlaid with pure, shimmering gold. Silver and bronze, painstakingly crafted, embellished its most sacred spaces. The very layout of the temple reflected the divinely ordained order of the cosmos. It took a full 7 years to complete, a number resonating with divine perfection and symbolic completion. But what truly rendered the temple glorious was not its breathtaking splendor. It was the divine presence it would house, the sacred flame it would protect. This was to be the earthly dwelling place of the God of Israel, the hallowed sanctuary where heaven would tangibly touch earth, where the divine and the mortal would converge. When the final stone was meticulously laid and the last golden vessel carefully placed, Solomon gathered the entire nation of Israel to dedicate this holy place, to consecrate it for its intended purpose. In that sacred hour, as the Ark of the Covenant was reverently brought into the most holy place, something miraculous, something truly extraordinary transpired. According to 1 Kings 8:10-11, the cloud of God's glory filled the temple of the Lord, so powerfully that the priests could not even perform their priestly duties because of the sheer, overwhelming presence of the Lord. For the glory of the Lord filled His temple to overflowing. What must it have felt like to stand beneath that luminous cloud, knowing with absolute certainty that God's tangible presence had entered the house constructed by human hands? Then, with a voice filled with reverence, Solomon lifted his voice in a prayer that would resonate through the corridors of time, echoing through the ages. His words, immortalized in 1 Kings 8:22-53, were not the carefully crafted pronouncements of a ruler addressing his subjects. They were the heartfelt, unrestrained cries of a humble servant before his almighty king. He extolled God's unparalleled greatness, acknowledging His supreme sovereignty, and pleaded with Him to always hear the prayers of His people, whether offered in triumphant celebration or in the depths of sorrowful despair. With profound humility and unwavering faith, Solomon declared in 1 Kings 8:23 Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below. You who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way. Was this Solomon at his zenith, not in terms of material wealth, not in terms of worldly influence, but in terms of pure, unadulterated spiritual surrender? Could it be that the true measure of a person's greatness is revealed not in what they construct with their own hands, but in what they reverently lift up to God in heartfelt prayer? At this pivotal moment, Solomon seemingly possessed it all: wisdom beyond human comprehension, wealth that defied calculation, and the radiant glory of the Lord filling the magnificent temple he had so meticulously constructed. Yet, tragically, the story does not conclude here, at this apparent apex. What transpires when blessings are no longer sufficient to hold a man's heart captive, when the very one who once stood enveloped in the cloud of God's glorious presence begins to gradually drift away from that very presence, lured by the deceptive whispers of temptation? There are still uncharted territories to explore, hidden depths to plumb, and unforeseen consequences to confront. And it will take us to places even Solomon, in all his wisdom, could not have possibly foreseen. During the zenith of Solomon's illustrious reign, Israel was not merely a kingdom. It was an unparalleled marvel, a breathtaking wonder that captivated the ancient world. Under his visionary leadership, the nation experienced an unprecedented era of peace, unparalleled prosperity, and immense prestige that had never before been witnessed in its history. From every compass point, the world turned its inquisitive eyes towards the radiant city of Jerusalem. What had once been a relatively small, frequently embattled land had metamorphosed into a luminous beacon of divine blessing, drawing traders eager for commerce, scholars hungry for knowledge, dignitaries seeking alliances, and kings longing to witness firsthand the palpable glory that enveloped Solomon. Scripture unequivocally states in 1 Kings 10:53-24 that King Solomon surpassed all the other kings of the earth in both riches and wisdom, holding a position of unrivaled prominence. Indeed, the entire world sought an audience with Solomon, yearning to imbibe the profound wisdom that God had graciously placed within his heart. Can you even begin to imagine the sheer spectacle of that scene? Rulers from distant and diverse nations, many with their own deeply ingrained gods, ancient traditions, and sprawling empires, setting aside their considerable pride and traversing vast distances simply to listen to the sagacious words of a man whom God had so demonstrably touched. What was it about Solomon that stirred such profound awe in the hearts of the mighty, that compelled them to seek his counsel above all others? His wealth was nothing short of legendary, a source of perpetual fascination and envy. Solomon held dominion over strategically vital trade routes that intricately connected the powerful civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia, thereby granting him unparalleled control over the economic heartbeat of the ancient world. His vast fleets traversed the expansive seas, returning like clockwork once every 3 years laden with exotic and highly prized cargo: gold, silver, exquisite ivory, playful apes, and vibrant peacocks, as meticulously detailed in 1 Kings 10:22. These were not mere baubles or trinkets. They were potent symbols of influence, demonstrating his reach across diverse cultures and far-flung continents. Solomon's name was spoken with reverence and respect in royal courts far beyond the borders of Israel, a testament to his enduring legacy. In 1 Kings 10:14, we are presented with an almost incomprehensible figure. A staggering 666 talents of gold flowed into his treasury each and every year. That translates to over 25 tons of pure gold annually. And that figure does not even include the vast revenues generated from merchants, the generous tributes offered by allied nations, and the myriad other sources of income that swelled his coffers. What would such an immense wealth look like if it were all amassed in one single location? How could a single mortal man wield such staggering opulence without ultimately succumbing to its corrupting influence? And then there was his throne, an unparalleled masterpiece of artistry and profound symbolism, a visual representation of his supreme power and divinely ordained authority. According to 1 Kings 10:18-20, it was meticulously carved from the finest ivory and lavishly overlaid with the purest gold, its surfaces gleaming under the light. 6 steps ascended to the regal seat, each one guarded by majestic, lifelike lions, 12 in total, standing as silent sentinels of strength and unwavering authority. No other throne in any other kingdom could even begin to rival its splendor, its magnificence, its sheer symbolic weight. It was far more than just a piece of furniture. It was a tangible, visual declaration that Solomon's reign stood above all others, divinely sanctioned and blessed beyond measure. Yet the sheer extravagance did not end at the royal chambers. It permeated every aspect of palace life. In 1 Kings 10:21, we are told that all of King Solomon's drinking goblets were fashioned from pure gold, and all the household articles within the opulent palace of the Forest of Lebanon were likewise crafted from the purest gold, shimmering and gleaming in the light. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered to be of relatively little value in Solomon's days, deemed too common to grace the king's table. Imagine living in a time and place where silver, a metal so highly prized in most kingdoms, was deemed unworthy, too commonplace to be used for the king's everyday utensils. The sheer scale of abundance transformed everyday life within the palace walls into a shimmering dream, a perpetual state of opulent luxury. But beneath all this dazzling beauty and brilliant splendor, an unspoken question begins to subtly stir, a disquieting sense of unease. Could such unparalleled luxury ultimately blind even the wisest of men, clouding his judgment and obscuring his spiritual vision? With every precious treasure acquired, every strategic alliance carefully formed, and every magnificent structure adorned in shimmering gold, something subtle, almost imperceptible, began to shift. Was this unprecedented grandeur still a pure reflection of God's abundant blessing? Or had it slowly, insidiously, transformed into a distorted mirror reflecting Solomon's burgeoning pride, his growing self-reliance? It is tempting to believe that endless success is always and invariably a sign of divine favor, a tangible manifestation of God's pleasure. But what if, hidden beneath the glittering golden cups and the imposing lion-guarded thrones, hairline fractures had already begun to form, imperceptible to the casual observer, but nonetheless present and growing? What if the very abundance intended to honor God had slowly, subtly, begun to draw the king's heart away from him, luring him down a treacherous path? Solomon stood atop the world, seemingly invincible, unassailable. But what happens when the heights become so dizzying, so intoxicating, that one inadvertently forgets the very ground beneath their feet, the foundation upon which their success was built? The ascent was undeniably glorious, a testament to God's favor and Solomon's divinely bestowed wisdom. But the descent, as we shall soon witness, would be equally breathtaking, if not more so, and infinitely more tragic, leaving an indelible stain on his otherwise illustrious legacy. With unimaginable wealth and worldwide admiration came something far more perilous, something far more insidious: temptation. Not the fleeting, momentary kind that brushes past us in an instant, but the insidious kind that settles in slowly, deliberately, cloaked in the seductive garb of power, diplomatic necessity, and unchecked, insatiable desire. As Solomon's sphere of influence expanded, so too did his complex entanglements with the nations surrounding Israel. And these connections, while seemingly strategic from a political standpoint, exacted a devastating spiritual toll. The book of 1 Kings 11-1-2 unveils a sobering, unsettling truth. King Solomon, defying God's express command, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, women of Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and the Hittites. They hailed from nations about which the Lord had explicitly warned the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods," foretelling the dire consequences of such disobedience. And yet Solomon, once acclaimed as the wisest man alive, the very embodiment of divine wisdom, consciously chose to disregard the explicit warning of the very God who had so generously granted him such unparalleled wisdom and discernment. Why would a man so richly blessed, so divinely enlightened, willingly flirt with the very boundaries that God had so clearly and emphatically drawn, placing himself in such grave spiritual peril? These were not merely casual romantic affairs or harmless diplomatic treaties. These were calculated acts of defiance with potentially devastating repercussions. Solomon took 700 wives, many of them princesses hailing from foreign lands, and 300 concubines, as meticulously recorded in 1 Kings 11:3. This was not merely a display of excessive indulgence. It was an act of open rebellion against God's divinely ordained will. It was a direct defiance of Deuteronomy 17:17, where God had explicitly warned that a king must not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart be led astray by their foreign influences. Yet Solomon, in a tragic display of self-will, did exactly what God had commanded him not to do, blatantly disregarding his divine warning. And the inevitable consequences did not manifest all at once in a sudden, cataclysmic event, but rather gradually, insidiously, like shadows creeping in unnoticed during the twilight hours, slowly dimming the light of God's presence. Over time, those wives, deeply steeped in the customs and worship of foreign deities, began to exert their insidious influence, slowly turning Solomon's heart away from the one true God. Slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly, the king who had once so fervently built a magnificent temple for the Lord began to construct altars for pagan idols, a shocking testament to his spiritual decline. 1 Kings 11:9 poignantly depicts this heartbreaking turning point. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been, marking a devastating shift in his spiritual allegiance. Did Solomon even notice the subtle shift occurring within himself, the gradual erosion of his spiritual foundation? Or was it so subtle, so insidious, that he no longer felt the weight of the divine glory that had once so powerfully filled the temple he had dedicated to the Lord? And then came the altars, the high places erected in blatant defiance of God's explicit commands. No longer was worship exclusively confined to the sacred temple in Jerusalem, the divinely ordained place of sacrifice. Solomon permitted, and even commissioned, the construction of sacred sites on hills and mountains throughout the land for the worship of gods who were not the God of Israel, a shocking display of spiritual compromise. In 1 Kings 11:5, we learn that he built shrines to Ashtoreth, the fertility goddess of the Sidonians, whose worship involved sensual rituals and orgiastic celebrations that profaned the holiness of Yahweh. He honored Chemosh, the vile god of the Moabites, and Molech of the Ammonites, gods whose followers engaged in the abhorrent practice of child sacrifice, an unspeakable abomination to the Lord. Solomon did not merely passively allow these foreign gods into the land. He actively made space for them within his kingdom, and by doing so, he tragically made space for them within his own heart, a devastating act of spiritual adultery. These were not mere acts of hospitality or tolerance. They were blatant acts of betrayal against the very God who had showered him with such abundant blessings. And God had made his will unequivocally clear long before, leaving no room for ambiguity. In Deuteronomy 12:2-3, the Lord commanded the Israelites to utterly destroy all the high places, demolishing them completely, whether located on high mountains, on hills, or under every spreading tree, and to break down their altars and smash their sacred stones, eradicating all traces of pagan worship from the land. Yet Solomon, in a shocking act of defiance, instead of tearing them down, actively erected new ones, building monuments to false gods. This was not born of ignorance or misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated act of disobedience, a conscious rejection of God's express will. How could it be that the very same man who had once knelt before the Ark of the Covenant, lifting up a prayer so pure and reverent, now kneel before lifeless idols carved by human hands, offering them sacrifices and homage? What happens when the wisdom that once so intimately connected a man to God becomes dulled by the seductive whispers of compromise, the alluring promises of worldly power and pleasure? And herein lies the tragic irony at the heart of Solomon's downfall. The very wisdom that Solomon had so earnestly requested from God, the wisdom to discern between good and evil, became tragically clouded not by a lack of knowledge or understanding, but by the divided loyalties of his own wavering heart, torn between the divine and the profane. Wisdom without obedience becomes a curse, a dangerous tool in the hands of a divided soul. Influence without integrity inevitably descends into idolatry, the worship of power and self above the one true God. So, as we reflect on Solomon's life, the message rings out clear and true. Even the wisest among us can stumble. Pride, compromise, and a slow drift from our initial devotion can lead us down paths we never intended to tread. Solomon's story isn't just a historical account. It's a powerful reminder to guard our hearts, to stay rooted in humility, and to cling to the one who gives us strength. What resonated most deeply with you from Solomon's journey? Perhaps a moment of his wisdom, or maybe the sting of his downfall. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, share your reflections, or ask any questions that this story has sparked. Let's continue this conversation together. And if you found this exploration insightful, be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on our next deep dive into biblical wisdom. We've got so much more to uncover together. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.